What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 9 C's of Reality, an apologetic for God's Kingship. I am your host, Caleb Callahan, and you have tuned into the 6th C, the Christ. Okay, so we're on the Christ, and I hope you've been following along. If you haven't been following along, I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to the first 5 C's. The point of the 9 C's is that it is a continual flow. It's a narrative. It's this epic story that is unfolding, that God is revealing with a purpose, okay? The Christ is going to be the books of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, also known as the Gospels. The audience is going to be the early church. Now, the early church is going to be full of Gentiles and Jews. Now, that's important to understand because one of my biggest concerns for ever thinking about being a pastor of some sort, like I'm highly compassionate to pastors in this area, I don't know how you do it, is the fact that your congregation is full of brand new believers, and then it's also full of people that need to go deeper, that are longing for meat, right? So you have milk and meat, according to the Bible, right? For all you Bible readers out there. And how do you provide a sermon that continuously goes deep while not leaving the young Christians behind, but also isn't so shallow, I don't want to use the word shallow, but beginner, that these people over here who have been there for 10 years are not like, ugh, like I've been there, done that a million times. To me, that'd be extremely hard. I mean, that to me is the hard part of pastoring. And I get that's why you have small groups, discipleship groups, like those are highly important in the church because of that problem. And we need to understand that too in the early church. That would have been a problem they would have had, but also not just brand new Christians and people that had understood the Bible well or the Old Testament well, right? Because you had a group of Gentiles that didn't know the Old Testament at all. And keep in mind, their Bible was the Old Testament, guys. We're going to talk about this more in the future. But a lot of people have written off the Old Testament today thinking, oh, we have the New Covenant, the New Testament, right? We'll put that Old Testament behind us. You can't understand the New Testament without the Old Testament. You can't do it. Can't do it. And I'm going to show you that through the Christ. We are going to get back into a Jewish mindset of understanding what Jesus was saying, the messages that he was preaching, and how his audience would have heard the message, okay? But we have to remember, because it was, there were Gentiles, they would have had no understanding of the Old Testament, a lot of Gentiles, but also Jews. Jews would have had a bad understanding of the Old Testament. But also, the fact that Jews were willing to submit to a message that said God became man, you need to understand how absurd that is. Like, Jews would not even say God's name out loud. They wouldn't even say his name out loud because it was too holy. But now they're accepting the fact that God became a man. And not only God became a man, but he died. But he died on a cross by his creation's hand. That's crazy. Like, you need to understand how crazy. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's crazy, okay? So that would have been kind of the audience that the Christ is dealing with. Also, in this C, we're going to be talking about a number of different things. We're going to be talking about the message of Jesus. Right here, the message of Jesus, the uniqueness of it, why it was rejected. We're going to be talking about Jesus' culture, like I was saying. What kind of culture did Jesus grow up in? Like, what was this culture, and how should we understand the context of the writing of each gospel? Because they're all very different. The culture is different from what a 21st century culture is today, but also the writer's personality is different. And God, although Scripture is inspired, God didn't put these authors in a trance and they're like, that's not what God did. right? That's not what inspiration means, right? God used their personalities. I mean, you can see that by looking at the 4 different styles of the gospel, right? Like right here in Matthew, we see Matthew starting with Abraham. That was a literary choice. The author chose to start with Abraham. Well, if he started with Abraham, who's he talking to? Primarily, think a Jewish audience. But you go over to Luke, right? We go over here to Luke 1. Luke 1. And we see the genealogies. And he starts with, maybe Luke 2. I'm so sorry. Ah! Seriously? Did I miss this? Here we go. He starts with Adam. Somewhere. Or he goes all the way back to Adam. The son of Adam. The son of God. You see that? So we have one that goes all the way back to Abraham, Jewish audience. Here, all the way back to Adam. He's pulling the Gentiles in. Right? He's bringing the Gentiles in. So we're gonna look at that kind of stuff. We're gonna look at the literary style. We're gonna look at the culture of the day and how we should understand the text. Okay. We're also gonna look at prophecy, how this Christ, the Messiah, Jesus, fulfilled these prophecies. Because how did they know that this was the Messiah? There had been other people that had claimed to be the Messiah. Jesus was fulfilling specific things that were in the Old Testament so that we would identify him as the Messiah. We're also going to look at his miracles, right? And so I'm going to give you 2 quick examples, very, very quick as we close out, of like the kind of stuff that we might be looking at and the stuff that you could learn in the Christ in the 9 C's. Stuff we'll be covering, okay? For one, when I was on my journey to belief and faith and trying to understand what was true, as I was studying every worldview that I could get my hands on, one thing that I recognized pretty quickly about Christianity that nobody ever wants to talk about is that Christianity should be pretty easy to disprove, unlike most other faiths. And there's a couple reasons I say that, right? But the main reason is a lot of the claims of Christianity are absurd. And these absurdities are unique to Christianity. And the reason they're absurd is because no one would claim these things unless they were true. Okay, you need to understand that. No one would claim these things if you were making up a belief system, a religion, unless it was true, because it would have been too easy to disprove. So let me give you a couple of examples, okay? God became man in the flesh. There's a reason why that's only in Christianity, right? And walked among us, right? Because the fact that you're claiming that this was a God man, Jesus was God in the flesh, is absurd. It's absurd. All he would have had to do was make one mistake, and you would have had authors writing about the fact that there's no way this man could have been God, right? Josephus, the historian Josephus, writes about Jesus. And he writes about him being a miracle worker, and he writes about him being a good man, and the fact that the Christians believed him to be God, right? This is outside sources from the gospel. There's others, and we'll point those out. But the fact that God became man is an absurd claim unless it's true. The miracles that Jesus did. Now, yes, miracles in and of themselves are not unique to Christianity, but the miracles that Jesus did and how they aligned with his character are. Also, you have the life of Jesus. The life of Jesus, how unique it was. Also, you have the fact that the Davidic king was killed by man. Right? There's a reason why the disciples, you need to understand this, were saying things like this to Jesus. When are you going to set up your throne? Can we reign at your right hand? Right? They had no concept of a suffering Messiah, the son of Joseph. That's not what they thought Jesus to be. They thought they were in on a good thing. They thought he was the Davidic king, the son of David, the one who was going to come and set up his empire and overthrow Rome. So when he went and died on a cross, they were confused. That's why they went and hid. We'll talk about more of that later. But the Davidic king dying on a cross doesn't seem like a great political move in order to start a movement, right? You might go, yeah, but he was a martyr. Yeah, but that's not what they understood him to be, right? That's not what they understood him to be. Also, you have the followers all through the Gospels, the disciples, painting themselves out to be pretty ridiculous, pretty stupid, like always just missing it. Well, that's still, that would not be a good political move. Like, why would you paint yourself out to be dumb and then say, follow me, right? You don't do that. You don't do that in your writings when you're making something up. But then finally, probably the most absurd one is the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? If you're going to make something up, why not just say he's spiritually resurrected? He appeared to me. Right, you have Muhammad who went into a cave and the angel gave him the Quran and he came out and he said, read it, follow it, listen to me. The angel appeared to me, Allah has spoken, and all of you should just listen to me. Well, that's very convenient, right? That's very convenient that that's how Allah would do it or choose to do it. And it doesn't seem like Allah is really wanting to make sure that people know that he has communicated if he's done it that way. It's not what God did. God wrote 66 books. He revealed to 66 different, some of the books are written by the same people, but he revealed to a multitude of people. He has told a story over thousands of years in 3 different languages with many different authors from all walks of life, right? That's how our God revealed. And then at his physical resurrection, he revealed himself to the 12, and it says 400 others, and he walked around for 40 days. Like, this is absurd. You would not make it up this way. Because it would be easy for somebody to go, yeah, that didn't happen. Yeah, I never saw Jesus. Right? You wouldn't do that. You'd go, he's spiritually resurrected. He hung out with me, and then he left. Believe me. You know why I know that? Because Joseph Smith did it. Muhammad did it. All those other people in other religions, all those other prophets, all those other disciples did that. And then we're going to get into Old Testament prophecy, textual criticism, the historicity of the Gospels, how we can know what we have today is what was written down there. We're going to deal with all that, okay? And then maybe more of a context thing, some of the stuff that we'll look at, that was more of an apologetic way in which we'll approach the Christ, but more of a concept thing is something as simple as this, right? So we have the announcements of the long-awaited Messiah's arrival. And a lot of people miss this announcement and this literary choice and how the Gospels are being portrayed. But if you think about the first couple of messages in the Gospel as Jesus is coming on the scene, right? You have the birth narrative, and then you also have the flee after Jesus is born. They flee to Egypt. And then you also have the baptism. So you have a fleeing to Egypt because of King Herod and him trying to kill all the children. And then you have a baptism by John. And then you have, after the baptism, Jesus going into the wilderness. And then Jesus starting his ministry. I want you to think about this. What does that echo? Moses? The Exodus? The Red Sea? The wilderness? This is not arbitrary choices, guys. Jesus is doing these things to say, I am the fulfillment. Jacob, Israel, I am Israel. That is who I am. I am your king. Your king that has come to suffer is finally here. Jews would have heard all of that in the triumphant arrival of the priest king, the one who came to suffer, the one who came to accomplish the Genesis 3:15 promise that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent, and the serpent would strike his heel. So this is where we're going to end the Christ, and I'll see you again next time in the cross.